I stood on that deserted highway watching Derek's taillights disappear into the darkness. 25 miles from home, rain soaking through my blue dress. My husband had just abandoned me because I dared to mention feeling excited about seeing my former colleague Sarah at tonight's charity gala. He called it teaching me a lesson about respect and gratitude. The cold asphalt beneath my heels felt more solid than our 3-year marriage ever had. Headlights cut through the downpour. A black truck slowed, then stopped. Marcus stepped out calm and professional as always. I smiled as I climbed into the warmth. Derek's cruelty had finally ended. This was his last mistake. 3 years ago, I met Derek Patterson at the prestigious law firm Morrison & Associates in downtown Denver, where I worked as a senior paralegal specializing in corporate litigation. He was the rising star junior partner everyone whispered about in the break room. Tall, confident, with perfectly styled brown hair and expensive suits that screamed success. During our first conversation by the coffee machine, he complimented my organizational skills on the Henderson merger case and asked if I wanted to grab dinner sometime to discuss career advancement opportunities. Those early months felt like a fairy tale. Derek showered me with attention-expensive dinners at Cherry Creek restaurants, weekend trips to Aspen, and constant praise about my intelligence and beauty. He told me I was different from other women, more sophisticated, more worthy of real partnership. When he proposed after 18 months with a stunning 2-carat diamond ring, I believed I had found my perfect match. The changes started so gradually I barely noticed them. First, Derek suggested I might be happier focusing on our relationship rather than pursuing the law degree I had been considering. Then he mentioned that my friend Jessica seemed jealous of our happiness and might not have my best interests at heart. When my sister Amy called too frequently, Derek would sigh and comment about how family drama always created unnecessary stress for couples trying to build something special together. By our second year of marriage, Derek had systematically isolated me from everyone who cared about me. He convinced me that my coworkers were gossiping about our relationship behind my back, so I should keep my personal life private at work. He explained that my college friends were still stuck in immature patterns and might influence me negatively. Even my relationship with my wealthy grandmother Eleanor became strained when Derek suggested her old-fashioned views about marriage might undermine our modern partnership. The financial control came next, disguised as romantic gestures. Derek insisted on handling all our accounts because he wanted to spoil me and take care of every detail of our life together. He opened joint credit cards and moved my paychecks into accounts he managed, explaining that his legal expertise made him better qualified to handle investments and budgeting. When I wanted to buy something beyond groceries and gas, I had to ask permission and justify the expense. The lessons began 6 months ago, right after Derek made full partner at the firm. The first time we were having dinner at his favorite steakhouse when I mentioned missing my old job responsibilities. Derek's face darkened. He stood up, dropped $40 on the table, and walked out without a word. I sat there for 20 minutes before realizing he was serious. The 2-mile walk home in heels taught me not to express dissatisfaction with our current arrangements. The second lesson happened 3 weeks later when I bought organic vegetables without checking prices first. Derek discovered the receipt and calculated that I had spent $12 more than necessary. He canceled my credit cards for a week, forcing me to ask him for money to buy basic necessities. Each request required a detailed explanation of why the purchase was essential. The humiliation was excruciating, but Derek insisted it would help me develop better financial awareness. More lessons followed with increasing frequency and severity. When I laughed too loudly at his colleague's joke during a firm dinner party, Derek made me walk the 6 blocks home alone while he stayed to network. When I forgot to record a small cash expense in our budget notebook, he refused to pick me up from work for 3 days, forcing me to take expensive rideshare services that he later criticized as wasteful spending. Today started like any other Saturday. Derek had laid out my outfit for the annual Morrison & Associates charity gala, a conservative navy blue dress with modest heels and minimal jewelry. He approved my makeup and hair, reminding me to smile graciously, but avoid lengthy conversations that might bore important firm clients. During our 40-minute drive to the downtown hotel venue, I felt genuinely excited for the first time in months. The excitement came from knowing that Sarah Chen, my former colleague and closest work friend, would be attending as a representative from her new firm. Sarah and I had maintained a secret text friendship despite Derek's disapproval, and I was looking forward to a few minutes of real conversation with someone who remembered who I used to be before marriage changed everything about my life. When I mentioned this innocent anticipation to Derek, his knuckles went white on the steering wheel. He pulled over immediately onto the shoulder of Highway 36, 25 miles outside the city limits. The isolated stretch of road was surrounded by empty fields and scattered ranch properties, with no houses or businesses visible in either direction. Derek turned to face me with the cold expression I had learned to fear. He accused me of planning to embarrass him by complaining about our marriage to Sarah. He insisted that my excitement about seeing an old friend proved I was ungrateful for everything he provided and needed a serious lesson about loyalty and priorities. When I tried to explain that I simply missed having female friendship in my life, Derek exploded. He shouted that I was selfish, manipulative, and completely undeserving of his patience and support. He ordered me to get out of the car immediately and think about my attitude while walking home. When I refused pointing out that we were in the middle of nowhere during a thunderstorm, Derek threatened to physically drag me onto the highway. I climbed out to avoid violence, watching in disbelief as my husband drove away without a backward glance. The rain soaked through my carefully chosen dress within minutes. My phone showed no signal bars. The temperature was dropping rapidly as darkness fell. Standing on that empty highway, shivering and completely alone, I finally understood that Derek's lessons had nothing to do with teaching me anything valuable and everything to do with breaking down my sense of self-worth and independence. But as I stood there in the downpour, headlights appeared in the distance. A black truck slowed and pulled over safely. The driver's door opened and Marcus stepped out. I had never been so relieved to see anyone in my entire life. As I climbed into the warm cab, I realized that Derek had just made the biggest mistake of his manipulative life. Marcus handed me a thick wool blanket and turned up the heat without saying a word. He was exactly what you would expect from a professional bodyguard mid-30s, with short military-style hair, calm gray eyes, and the kind of physical presence that suggested years of specialized training. His movements were precise and efficient as he reached into the back seat for a thermos of hot coffee. "Mrs. Patterson," he said quietly, "I apologize for the circumstances, but I want you to know you are completely safe now." I stared at him in confusion while wrapping the blanket around my soaked dress. "How did you know where to find me? I don't understand what's happening." Marcus pulled back onto the highway and adjusted the rearview mirror to check for other vehicles. "Your grandmother Eleanor hired me 2 months ago. I have been maintaining discreet surveillance to ensure your safety and document any concerning behavior from your husband." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Grandmother Eleanor hired you, but how did she even know? "She attended the firm's summer barbecue at your home in July. Mrs. Hartford is quite observant, and she noticed several troubling patterns in Mr. Patterson's treatment of you during that gathering. After the event, she contacted my security firm to discuss options for protecting family members in potentially dangerous domestic situations." I remembered that barbecue clearly. Derek had been performing his charming husband routine for the attorneys and their families, but Eleanor had witnessed him criticizing my food preparation in harsh whispers when he thought no one was listening. She had also seen him physically steer me away from conversations and watched him monitor my interactions with other guests throughout the afternoon. Marcus continued driving toward Denver while explaining Eleanor's growing concerns. Mrs. Hartford asked me to conduct a comprehensive background investigation on Derek Patterson. The results were extremely troubling. He reached into the console and handed me a manila folder. "Mr. Patterson has been married twice before. Both marriages ended with restraining orders and domestic violence charges, though he managed to avoid convictions through legal maneuvering and character witnesses from his professional network. My hands trembled as I opened the folder and saw police reports, court documents, and photographs. Derek's first wife, Amanda, had filed 3 separate domestic violence reports over 2 years. The incidents escalated from psychological intimidation to financial abuse to physical threats. His second wife, Lauren, had documented a pattern of stalking and harassment that continued for 18 months after their divorce. These women tried to warn people about Derek's true nature, but his reputation in the legal community protected him, Marcus explained. He learned to be more careful about leaving evidence and more strategic about isolating his victims from potential support systems. I felt sick reading the detailed accounts of Derek's previous behavior. The pattern was identical to what I had experienced, but worse. Both women described the same gradual isolation, financial control, and psychological punishment disguised as relationship improvement. But their stories also included escalating threats, property destruction, and attempts to sabotage their careers and personal relationships. "Why didn't anyone warn me?" I whispered. Amanda moved to Oregon immediately after her divorce was finalized. Lauren relocated to Texas and legally changed her name. Both women were terrified that Derek would retaliate if they spoke publicly about their experiences. His connections in the legal system made them feel powerless to seek justice. Marcus explained that Eleanor had spent weeks deciding how to approach the situation. She could not simply tell me about Derek's history without proof, and she knew that abusive partners often escalated their behavior when confronted directly. Instead, she chose to build a comprehensive support system that would be ready when I needed help. Your grandmother has been working with a team of domestic violence specialists, family law attorneys, and financial advisors to prepare options for you, Marcus said. She wanted to ensure that when you were ready to leave, you would have every resource necessary to do so safely and permanently. The folder contained additional shocking information. Derek had been systematically stealing from my personal accounts, including a trust fund Eleanor had established years earlier. He'd also been building credit card debt in my name while hiding the statements. Financial forensic accountants had traced over $80,000 in fraudulent transactions and identity theft. Mrs. Hartford has been quietly building a separate financial account in your name, Marcus continued. She has also consulted with the state's most experienced domestic violence attorneys to understand your legal options. I broke down crying as the full scope of Eleanor's protective efforts became clear. While I had felt increasingly isolated and trapped, my grandmother had been working tirelessly to create an escape plan. She had recognized the danger I was in before I fully understood it myself. Marcus handed me tissues and gave me time to process the information before continuing. Mrs. Hartford anticipated that Derek would eventually escalate to something like tonight's abandonment. Abusers typically increase their control tactics when they sense their victims developing independence or outside support. As we approached the Denver city limits, Marcus received an urgent call on his hands-free device. His expression darkened as he listened to the caller's report. "Mrs. Patterson, we have a developing situation. Derek did not attend the charity gala as expected. Instead, he has returned to your house and is currently live streaming a video on social media. He is destroying your personal belongings while claiming that you abandoned your marriage." My stomach dropped as Marcus pulled over to show me his phone. Derek was in our bedroom throwing my clothes out the window while sobbing dramatically for his growing online audience. The video had already been viewed thousands of times, with comments flooding in to support the heartbroken husband whose ungrateful wife had supposedly walked out on their perfect marriage. I watched in horror as Derek held up family photos and childhood mementos before tossing them into the fireplace. He was telling his audience that I had become increasingly unstable and selfish, refusing his attempts to help me work through my issues. The performance was convincing and devastating. "This changes our timeline significantly," Marcus said grimly. "Derek is attempting to control the narrative before you can reveal the truth about his behavior. We need to move quickly to protect your reputation and safety." As I watched my life being destroyed in real time on social media, I realized that Derek's abandonment tonight was not just another lesson. It was the beginning of his final, most dangerous manipulation campaign, and this time he had seriously underestimated the support system that was ready to fight back. The live stream had already attracted over 10,000 viewers and was climbing rapidly. Derek had positioned his phone camera strategically to capture the most dramatic angles while hiding the destruction he had obviously begun before starting the recording. He was wearing his best charcoal gray suit and had styled his hair perfectly, creating the image of a devastated but dignified husband trying to understand his wife's betrayal. Marcus parked at a 24-hour diner and connected his phone to the truck's larger screen so we could monitor the situation more effectively. The comments section was exploding with sympathy for Derek and harsh criticism of me. Viewers were offering to send money to help the abandoned husband, sharing stories of their own ungrateful partners and praising Derek's emotional vulnerability. "Look at how he's controlling every detail," Marcus pointed out as Derek carefully selected which of my belongings to destroy next. "He's burned photographs of you with other people, but kept pictures of the two of you together. He's destroying your hobby supplies and personal books, but leaving expensive items that would make him look vindictive." Derek's performance was masterfully manipulative. He spoke directly to his audience about the pain of loving someone who could not appreciate the life they had built together. He described my supposed ingratitude for his financial support, my alleged rudeness to his colleagues, and my recent withdrawal from our relationship. Every accusation was framed as concern for my well-being, rather than criticism of my character. "She used to be so loving and supportive," Derek told the camera while holding up my pottery supplies. "But lately, she's become distant and critical. I've tried everything to help her work through whatever issues she's facing, but she seems determined to sabotage our happiness." The audience was completely convinced. Comments poured in, calling me selfish, immature, and mentally unstable. Several viewers had already identified me through Derek's professional social media profiles and were sharing my name and workplace information. Someone had even found and posted my grandmother's address. Marcus received another call from Eleanor's security team. "Mrs. Patterson, local news stations are beginning to pick up the story. Derek's law firm colleagues are rallying to support him publicly, and the charity gala organizers have released a statement expressing concern for his emotional well-being." I felt physically sick watching my reputation disintegrate in real time. Everything I had worked to build professionally and personally was being destroyed by Derek's calculated performance. The narrative he was creating would follow me for years, affecting my career prospects and personal relationships. But Marcus remained calm and focused. "Mrs. Patterson, Derek believes he is in control of this situation, but he has made several critical errors. First, he does not know that his behavior has been documented for weeks. Second, he is unaware that his previous wives have been contacted and are willing to testify about their experiences. Third, he has no idea that Mrs. Hartford's legal team has been preparing for exactly this scenario." Marcus showed me files containing video recordings, audio transcripts, and photographic evidence of Derek's actual behavior toward me. Hidden cameras had captured his verbal abuse, his threats, and his systematic destruction of my self-confidence. Financial records proved his theft and fraud. Phone recordings revealed his manipulative conversations with mutual friends and colleagues. "Your grandmother's attorneys have been building a comprehensive case documenting Derek's pattern of abuse across multiple relationships," Marcus explained. "They were waiting for him to make a move like this before releasing the evidence." Eleanor's legal strategy was brilliant in its thoroughness. Rather than reacting defensively to Derek's accusations, her team would present overwhelming proof of his true character. The contrast between his public persona and documented reality would be devastating to his reputation and legal standing. Marcus's phone rang again. This time it was Eleanor herself calling to check on my safety and discuss our next steps. Her voice was steady and reassuring as she explained that Derek's livestream was actually providing additional evidence of his unstable behavior and lack of concern for my well-being. "Callie, dear, I want you to know that everything Derek is saying and doing right now will be used against him in court," Eleanor said. His decision to destroy your property and broadcast false accusations is giving us exactly what we need to secure restraining orders and criminal charges. But even as Eleanor spoke, Derek's live stream took an even more disturbing turn. He had found the hidden camera Marcus had placed in our bedroom as part of the protection surveillance. His reaction was immediate and terrifying. Derek's carefully maintained composure cracked completely as he held up the tiny device. His face contorted with rage as he realized that someone had been documenting his private behavior. The audience watched in shock as their sympathetic victim transformed into something much darker and more dangerous. "Someone has been spying on me," Derek snarled at the camera. "Some sick person has been watching my private life and recording my personal moments. When I find out who did this, they are going to pay for violating my privacy and trying to destroy my marriage." The threats escalated rapidly as Derek's mask fell away entirely. He began describing in graphic detail what he would do to anyone who had helped me betray our marriage. The comments section shifted dramatically as viewers realized they were witnessing something much more sinister than a heartbroken husband's emotional breakdown. Marcus immediately contacted law enforcement, while Derek continued his threatening tirade. The live stream was now providing perfect evidence of Derek's dangerous mental state and his potential for violence against anyone he perceived as interfering with his control over me. "Mrs. Patterson," Marcus said quietly, "Derek has just made his final mistake. Everything he is saying and doing right now is being recorded by thousands of witnesses. His legal career is over, and his criminal prosecution just became inevitable." As Derek's rage intensified on screen, I realized that his need to maintain power and control had finally driven him to reveal his true nature in the most public way possible. The very narcissism that made him such an effective manipulator was now ensuring his complete destruction. Derek's live stream continued for another 27 minutes as he systematically searched the house for additional surveillance equipment. Each discovery sent him deeper into a paranoid rage that his audience found increasingly disturbing. Comments that had initially supported him now expressed concern about his mental stability and suggested he should seek professional help. The transformation was complete and irreversible. Derek had destroyed his carefully crafted image of the perfect husband and revealed himself as a dangerous, controlling abuser, willing to make public threats against anyone who challenged his authority. Several viewers had already contacted local police to report the threatening behavior they were witnessing. Marcus drove us to Eleanor's remote mountain cabin while monitoring Derek's increasingly erratic behavior through multiple feeds. The cabin was located on 200 acres of private land in the Rockies, accessible only through a single gated road that could be easily monitored and controlled. But this location was not simply a hiding place. Eleanor and her security team had spent weeks preparing the property as the ideal setting to document Derek's final destructive actions. Motion-activated cameras surrounded the entire perimeter. Recording equipment monitored all approaches, and local law enforcement had been briefed on the potential for a dangerous confrontation. "Derek will find this location within 48 hours. Marcus explained as we arrived at the beautifully appointed log cabin. He has access to private investigators through his legal connections, and his narcissistic personality will not allow him to accept that you have successfully escaped his control." Eleanor greeted me with tears in her eyes and the strongest embrace I had received in years. At 73, my grandmother remained sharp, elegant, and absolutely fierce when protecting her family. She had been monitoring Derek's live stream and coordinating with her legal team throughout the evening. "Sweetheart, I am so sorry you had to endure that man's abuse for this long," she said, "but I want you to know that his behavior tonight has given us everything we need to ensure he never hurts you or anyone else again." The cabin filled with additional support as my estranged sister Amy arrived from Portland and my former best friend Jessica drove in from Boulder. These relationships that Derek had systematically destroyed were suddenly restored, creating a circle of protection and love I had forgotten was possible. Amy explained that Eleanor had contacted her weeks earlier to explain Derek's true history and the growing concerns about my safety. I have been going crazy wanting to reach out to you, but grandmother's security team advised waiting until we could offer you real protection and legal options. Jessica's revelation was equally stunning. She described receiving a phone call from Derek 8 months earlier claiming I was suffering from depression and anxiety that required careful management. He had convinced her that maintaining contact with me would interfere with my treatment and potentially worsen my condition. Derek was so convincing and professional, Jessica said through tears. He thanked me for caring about your well-being and promised to keep me updated on your progress. I felt terrible staying away, but I trusted his expertise as your husband. This manipulation extended far beyond my immediate relationships. Derek had contacted my former co-workers, college friends, and even distant relatives with similar stories about my supposed mental health struggles. He had systematically convinced everyone who cared about me to maintain distance for my own good. Eleanor's legal team worked throughout the night to coordinate our response strategy. Rather than simply defending against Derek's accusations, they would present comprehensive evidence of his pattern of abuse while simultaneously releasing information about his previous marriages and current criminal behavior. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Derek's own actions would provide the evidence needed to destroy his reputation and ensure his prosecution. His narcissistic belief in his own superiority had led him to create a perfect record of his abusive behavior and criminal threats. At 3:30 in the morning, Derek's location tracking confirmed what Marcus had predicted. He was driving toward the mountains with GPS equipment, determined to confront me directly, rather than working through legal channels or law enforcement. His decision to take matters into his own hands would provide the final evidence needed to demonstrate his dangerous character. Marcus coordinated with local sheriff's deputies to establish a perimeter around the cabin property. Hidden cameras would record Derek's approach and any actions he took on the private land. Multiple law enforcement agencies were standing by to intervene the moment he committed any criminal acts. "Mrs. Patterson Derek believes he is hunting you," Marcus said as we monitored his approach through thermal imaging equipment. "But the reality is that he has been walking into a carefully prepared trap that will document his most dangerous behaviors and ensure his permanent removal from your life." Eleanor squeezed my hand as we watched Derek's vehicle turn onto the private mountain road. "Sweetheart, this nightmare is almost over. In a few hours, you will be completely free to rebuild your life exactly as you choose." The irony was perfect. Derek's need to maintain control and dominance had driven him to make the very choices that would ensure his complete defeat. His arrogance and narcissism had blinded him to the possibility that his victim might have allies more powerful and strategic than he could imagine. As Derek's headlights appeared through the trees, I felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time in years, I was surrounded by people who genuinely cared about my well-being. Derek was about to discover that his lessons in powerlessness had taught me something he never intended. I had learned exactly how strong I could be when I stopped accepting his definition of my worth. Derek arrived at the cabin at 4:17 in the morning, his BMW sedan loaded with tools that painted a terrifying picture of his intentions. Security cameras captured him, removing rope zip ties, a crowbar, and a baseball bat from his trunk. His movements were methodical and purposeful as he approached the cabin, believing he was about to reclaim his property and punish everyone who had interfered with his authority. The remote location had convinced Derek he could act without consequences. He circled the cabin twice, checking windows and testing doors, while muttering threats that the surveillance equipment recorded clearly. His words revealed the full extent of his narcissistic rage and his complete inability to accept that I had successfully escaped his control. Derek's first criminal act was smashing the living room window with the crowbar. Glass shattered across the hardwood floors as he climbed through the opening, shouting my name and demanding that I stop hiding like a coward. He moved through the cabin, systematically destroying furniture and searching for any sign of my presence. What Derek found instead was a carefully prepared scene designed to capture his true character on multiple recording devices. The main room contained a large television screen displaying a message I had written, explaining my decision to leave him and seek protection from his abuse. Speakers played my recorded voice reading the statement aloud, ensuring that Derek's response would be captured clearly. The message was simple and direct. I explained that I had discovered his history of abusing previous wives and his systematic theft of my financial assets. I stated clearly that our marriage was over and that I would be seeking legal protection from his continued harassment. I wished him well in getting the psychological help he obviously needed. Derek's reaction exceeded even Marcus's worst-case predictions. He attacked the television with the baseball bat, screaming obscenities and threats, while promising to track me down and make me pay for my betrayal. He found additional recording equipment throughout the cabin and destroyed each device while ranting about privacy violations and conspiracy against him. The audio quality was perfect as Derek described in graphic detail what he planned to do when he found me. He threatened violence against me, Eleanor, Marcus, and anyone else who had helped me escape his authority. He revealed information about financial crimes he had committed and admitted to behaviors that constituted clear grounds for multiple felony charges. Law enforcement moved into position as Derek's destruction escalated beyond property damage into clear threats of personal violence. Sheriff's deputies surrounded the cabin while Derek continued his rampage, unaware that every word and action was being documented by concealed surveillance systems he had not discovered. The final evidence came when Derek found the GPS tracking device that Marcus had secretly placed on my phone months earlier. Derek's reaction revealed that he had been using this device to monitor my location throughout our marriage, violating privacy laws and demonstrating premeditated stalking behavior. "I have been watching every move you make for months," Derek screamed at the recording equipment. "You belong to me and I will never let you go. I will find you wherever you are hiding and I will make you remember who is in charge of your pathetic life." Sheriff's deputies entered the cabin as Derek raised the baseball bat to destroy another piece of furniture. His arrest was swift and professional, with multiple officers subduing him while reading his rights. Derek's shock at being confronted by law enforcement revealed how completely his narcissism had disconnected him from reality. The charges were extensive and undeniable: breaking and entering, destruction of property, stalking, making terroristic threats, violation of electronic privacy laws, and conspiracy to commit kidnapping based on the restraints and tools found in his vehicle. The evidence was overwhelming and had been witnessed by both surveillance equipment and multiple law enforcement officers. From our secure location 30 miles away, I watched the arrest through live video feeds. The man who had controlled every aspect of my life for 3 years was being handcuffed and placed in the back of a police cruiser, his expensive suit torn and his perfectly styled hair disheveled from his violent rampage. Eleanor held my hand as we watched Derek's final defeat. "Sweetheart, that man will never hurt you or anyone else again. His legal career is finished, his reputation is destroyed, and his criminal behavior has been documented beyond any possibility of manipulation or denial." Marcus received confirmation that Derek's arrest had been coordinated with prosecutors who were already familiar with his case through Eleanor's legal team. Additional charges related to financial fraud and domestic abuse would be filed within 24 hours, ensuring that Derek would remain in custody without possibility of bail. Amy and Jessica surrounded me with support as the reality of my freedom began to sink in. The man who had systematically destroyed my self-confidence and independence was now facing the consequences of his own choices. His arrogance and need for control had driven him to create perfect evidence of his criminal character. Derek's attempt to reclaim his property had instead resulted in his complete and permanent defeat. His lessons in powerlessness had backfired spectacularly, teaching me strength I never knew I possessed, while providing law enforcement with everything they needed to ensure his prosecution. As dawn broke over the mountains, I realized that Derek's cruelty had unintentionally led me to discover the most important truth of my life. I was not the weak, dependent victim he had tried to create. I was a strong, intelligent woman surrounded by people who loved and supported me. Derek's final lesson had taught me something he never intended. I had learned to recognize my own worth and fight to protect it. Derek's arraignment 3 days later drew significant media attention as details of his systematic abuse across multiple marriages became public record. The courtroom was packed with reporters, domestic violence advocates, and Derek's former colleagues from Morrison and Associates who watched in shock as the charming attorney they thought they knew was revealed to be a calculated predator. Prosecutor Maria Rodriguez presented evidence that painted a devastating picture of escalating criminal behavior spanning 15 years. Derek's first wife, Amanda, had been contacted by Eleanor's legal team and agreed to testify about physical abuse that had never been successfully prosecuted due to Derek's legal maneuvering and intimidation tactics. His second wife, Lauren, flew in from Texas to provide testimony about financial fraud and stalking that continued for 18 months after their divorce. Her courage in facing Derek again was remarkable, and her detailed account of his systematic destruction of her career and relationships provided crucial context for understanding his pattern of behavior. My own testimony was the most difficult and empowering experience of my life. Standing in that courtroom facing the man who had controlled every aspect of my existence, I found strength in my voice that Derek had spent years trying to destroy. I spoke clearly and factually about his manipulation tactics, financial theft, and escalating threats. Derek's attorney attempted to portray him as a successful professional who had been driven to temporary emotional breakdown by his wife's abandonment and betrayal. But the evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Video recordings of Derek's abuse, audio transcripts of his threats, financial records, proving theft, and witness testimony from multiple victims created an unshakable case. The prosecution introduced Derek's detailed notebooks discovered in his car during the arrest. These pages revealed his systematic planning to escalate control over me, including strategies for complete financial dependence and geographic isolation that would have made escape impossible. His own handwriting provided chilling evidence of premeditated domestic terrorism. Derek's attempts to manipulate the proceedings backfired completely. His arrogant interruptions during testimony and obvious contempt for the judicial process alienated the judge and jury. His belief in his own superiority prevented him from showing genuine remorse or accepting responsibility for his actions. Judge Patricia Williams sentenced Derek to 8 years in federal prison on multiple felony charges, with additional time for financial crimes and violations of restraining orders from his previous marriages. She specifically noted the escalating pattern of abuse and the potential for violence that had been prevented only through intervention. The financial restitution exceeded $200,000, covering not only the money Derek had stolen from me, but also damages to his previous wives, who had never received justice. Derek's assets were liquidated to pay these debts, leaving him with nothing but legal fees and the consequences of his choices. Eleanor's foundation work had always focused on education and healthcare, but witnessing Derek's systematic abuse inspired her to expand into domestic violence prevention and support services. She asked me to consider taking a leadership role in this new initiative, offering not just employment, but the opportunity to transform my painful experience into meaningful help for other women. The invitation came at the perfect time in my healing journey. Through intensive therapy with Dr. Sarah Martinez, a specialist in domestic abuse recovery, I had begun to understand how Derek's manipulation had affected my sense of self-worth and decision-making ability. Rebuilding my confidence was a gradual process, but having a clear purpose accelerated my recovery significantly. My professional reputation was not only restored, but enhanced by my courage in exposing Derek's criminal behavior. Morrison and Associates offered me a senior paralegal position with significantly better compensation and responsibilities than I had previously held. other law firms also expressed interest in hiring someone with my experience and demonstrated integrity under pressure. The media coverage of Derek's case had an unexpected positive impact. Women from across the country contacted Eleanor's foundation to share their own stories of abuse and seek guidance for escape and recovery. My decision to fight back publicly had created a ripple effect of courage that helped dozens of other women find their own strength. Marcus transitioned from personal protection to heading security operations for Eleanor's expanded foundation work. Our professional relationship had evolved into genuine friendship based on mutual respect and shared commitment to preventing domestic abuse. His expertise in threat assessment and tactical planning became invaluable in protecting other women facing dangerous situations. Derek's law firm career ended permanently when the Colorado Bar Association revoked his license following his conviction. His former colleagues, who had initially rallied to support him during the live stream incident, publicly apologized and donated significant funds to domestic violence organizations as acknowledgement of their failure to recognize his true character. The revelation that sent shockwaves through the legal community was Derek's systematic manipulation of his professional network to enable his abuse. He had used character references from respected attorneys to avoid prosecution, exploited client confidentiality rules to hide evidence, and leveraged his legal expertise to intimidate victims into silence. 6 months after Derek's sentencing, Eleanor presented me with an opportunity that would define my future. She wanted to establish a comprehensive domestic abuse intervention program that combined legal advocacy, financial protection security services, and therapeutic support under one organizational structure. Callie, you understand this issue from the inside in ways that traditional advocates cannot, Eleanor explained. Your experience combined with your intelligence and legal knowledge makes you uniquely qualified to lead this initiative. You have turned your greatest vulnerability into your most powerful strength. Accepting Eleanor's offer felt like the completion of my transformation from victim to survivor to advocate. Derek's lessons in powerlessness had unintentionally taught me about resilience, courage, and the importance of protecting vulnerable people from predators who exploit trust and affection for personal gain. As I stood in the courthouse after Derek's sentencing, surrounded by the women whose support had made my freedom possible, I realized that his final attempt to teach me a lesson had succeeded beyond his worst nightmares. I had learned that strength comes not from enduring abuse silently, but from recognizing your worth and taking decisive action to protect it. Derek's cruelty had accidentally led me to discover my own power, and I was determined to use that discovery to help other women find their strength as well. 18 months after that rainy night on Highway 36, I stood in the executive office of the Eleanor Hartford Foundation for Domestic Violence Prevention, looking out at the Rocky Mountains while reviewing applications from women seeking our protection and advocacy services. The transformation in my life had been so complete that sometimes I barely recognized the frightened, isolated woman Derek had tried to create. The foundation had helped 63 women escape abusive relationships during its first year of operation. Our comprehensive approach included legal representation, financial planning, temporary housing, security protection, and therapeutic support services, all coordinated through a single intake process. The success rate was remarkable because we addressed every aspect of abuse recovery simultaneously. Marcus had developed an innovative protection program that combined traditional security services with modern technology and legal advocacy. Hidden surveillance systems, emergency communication devices, safe house networks, and rapid response protocols had prevented dozens of potentially violent confrontations while gathering evidence for successful prosecutions. Derek was serving his sentence at a federal correctional facility in Texas, far from Colorado, and completely cut off from the legal and social networks he had used to enable his abuse. Prison reports indicated he remained convinced that he was the victim of a conspiracy and showed no signs of accepting responsibility for his actions or developing empathy for the women he had harmed. His appeals had been denied at every level, and additional charges from other states were pending as more victims found courage to come forward. Derek's case had become a textbook example of how narcissistic abusers escalate their behavior when their control is challenged, and law enforcement agencies across the country used his documentation for training purposes. Eleanor and I had developed a relationship that went far beyond our familial connection. Working together on the foundation had revealed shared values, complementary skills, and genuine affection that enriched both our lives. She had become my mentor, partner, and closest friend while I provided energy innovation and personal insight that enhanced her decades of philanthropic experience. The foundation's success had attracted national attention and funding from major donors who recognized the effectiveness of our integrated approach. We were expanding operations to include training programs for law enforcement, legal professionals, and healthcare providers who often miss early warning signs of domestic abuse. My personal healing journey had been supported by Dr. Martinez's excellent therapy, but the real transformation came through helping other women navigate their own escape and recovery processes. Each success story reinforced my understanding that Derek's abuse had been about his inadequacies, not mine. The relationships Derek had destroyed were now stronger than ever. Amy visited frequently from Portland and had become actively involved in foundation fundraising efforts. Jessica and I had rebuilt our friendship with deeper appreciation for honesty and mutual support. Even my former colleagues from Morrison and Associates had reached out to express admiration for my courage and offer professional networking opportunities. One afternoon, while reviewing a particularly difficult case involving a woman trapped by an abuser with connections to local law enforcement, I received a letter that brought my journey full circle. It was from Amanda Derek's first wife, who had seen news coverage of the foundation's work. Amanda explained that Derek's conviction had finally given her closure after years of living in fear of his retaliation. She described how watching my courage to fight back publicly had inspired her to seek therapy and rebuild relationships that Derek's abuse had destroyed. She was now volunteering with domestic violence organizations in Oregon and considering a career change to victim advocacy. Similar letters arrived regularly from women who had found strength through the foundation's services, or simply through learning about the possibility of escape and recovery. Each message reinforced the ripple effect of courage that began with Eleanor's decision to protect me and my choice to fight back against Derek's manipulation. The foundation had also attracted attention from Derek's other victims, creating a support network that extended far beyond our immediate services. Women who had survived his abuse were connecting with each other, sharing resources and encouragement, while building new lives free from his destructive influence. Marcus had become more than the foundation's security director. He was a trusted friend whose calm competence and genuine care for vulnerable people made him invaluable to our mission. His military background and protective instincts had found perfect expression in preventing domestic violence rather than responding to international conflicts. One evening, as I finished reviewing grant applications for expanding our services to rural communities, I reflected on the profound irony of Derek's final lesson. His attempt to break my spirit through abandonment and humiliation had accidentally led me to discover my own strength and purpose. The woman who had stood shivering on that highway in the rain had been afraid, isolated, and convinced of her own inadequacy. The woman I had become was confident, connected to a supportive community, and committed to using her experience to protect other vulnerable people from predators who exploited trust and affection. Derek's lessons in powerlessness had taught me something he never intended. True strength does not come from controlling others or enduring suffering silently. It comes from recognizing your own worth, seeking help when you need it, and taking decisive action to protect yourself and others from harm. The rain that had soaked through my blue dress on that terrible night had washed away the illusion that Derek's approval was necessary for my happiness or success. Standing in that downpour, I had finally seen clearly that his supposed lessons were actually systematic abuse designed to diminish my independence and self-worth. Marcus had arrived at exactly the right moment, but the real rescue had come from Eleanor's love and strategic planning, from Amy and Jessica's willingness to forgive and reconnect, from my own decision to stop accepting Derek's definition of my capabilities and limitations. Looking back, I understood that Derek's abandonment had been both his cruelest act and his greatest gift. In forcing me to confront my isolation and vulnerability, he had accidentally created the circumstances that led to my liberation and transformation. His final lesson had taught me that I was stronger, smarter, and more worthy of love and respect than he had ever allowed me to believe. The Foundation's work continued to expand, reaching women in increasingly dangerous situations and providing hope for escape and recovery that many had thought impossible. Each success story reinforced my conviction that no woman should have to endure what Derek and men like him inflict on the people who trust them most. Every morning when I arrived at the Foundation office, I passed a framed photograph of that black truck pulling up beside me on the rainy highway. It reminded me that sometimes salvation comes from unexpected directions, that family love can transcend distance and time, and that strength we never knew we possessed can emerge from our darkest moments. Derek believed he was teaching me dependence and submission. Instead, his cruelty taught me independence and courage. He thought he was isolating me from support systems that might threaten his control. Instead, his abuse led me to discover allies more powerful and committed than I had ever imagined possible. The most important lesson I learned was that recognizing abuse and seeking help is not weakness, but wisdom. Accepting support from people who genuinely care about your well-being is not dependence, but healthy interdependence. Fighting back against systematic cruelty is not vindictiveness, but self-preservation and protection of future victims. As I prepared to leave the office that evening, I smiled, thinking about the young woman who had contacted our intake coordinator that morning. She was trapped in a situation remarkably similar to what I had experienced with Derek, but she had reached out for help much sooner than I had managed to do. Tomorrow, Marcus would begin coordinating her protection while our legal team prepared documentation of her husband's financial crimes. By next week, she would be safe in one of our secure housing facilities with access to therapy, legal advocacy, and financial planning services that would ensure her permanent freedom and recovery. Her escape would be easier than mine because other women had shared their experiences and built systems to protect vulnerable people from predators who exploit love and trust for personal gain. The cycle of abuse would be broken one woman at a time, one family at a time, one community at a time. Derek's legacy was the opposite of what he had intended. Instead of creating a submissive, dependent victim, his abuse had produced a strong advocate committed to preventing other women from enduring what he had inflicted. His attempts to teach powerlessness had accidentally taught me about the power of courage, community, and compassion. Standing at my office window, watching the sunset paint the mountains in brilliant colors, I felt profound gratitude for the rainy night that changed everything. Derek's cruelty had ended, but the strength it accidentally taught me would continue protecting vulnerable women for years to come. The most beautiful irony was that Derek's final, most brutal lesson had been the one that set me free. Have you or someone you know ever experienced the kind of controlling behavior that slowly chips away at your independence and self-worth? What signs do you think are most important for people to recognize when someone is trying to isolate them from supportive relationships? Please share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please like this video to help it reach other people who might need to hear this message. Do not forget to subscribe for more stories about finding strength in difficult circumstances, and share this with anyone who might benefit from understanding how manipulation tactics work and how courage can emerge from our most challenging experiences. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it reminds you that no matter how powerless someone tries to make you feel, you always have more strength than you realize. Stay safe. Trust your instincts and remember that asking for help is one of the bravest things you can do.